Hello, Prosper. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. And I wanted to, meet. I am Deep Medi. I wanted to do this series of things about trying to learn about people I have met in my life over the years. And so let's start with Prosper. Tell me your full name and where were you born and where did you grow up? So,
Well, thank you, Deep, for giving me the opportunity to this interview. I know that we know each other since almost 30 years, so it's a long time. My name is Prosper Chemouil. I was born in Bordeaux, in France, the
mm-hmm,
place where we grow wine.
mm-hmm.
But my family originally came from Algeria because it was a French department, and my family was settled down since 100 years there, in centuries in Algeria.
I see.
And
Okay.
finally, by the end of the 50s, we moved back to France. Definitely, and I settled in the east of France, where I spent all my younger years from 7 to 20 years old.
Okay.
So first I was in a small village, living in a small village, 400 inhabitants, and next to the border, German border, because my father was working in the customs.
Mm.
And then when I moved to what we have, I would say, college in France, which is not the same type of college as in the United States,
Mhm.
then we moved to Nancy, which is a larger city in Lorraine, which is one of the region. I did all my studies there,
Mhm.
and until I went to the what we call preparation to high school.
Mhm.
And after some concourse, I was accepted in a mechanical engineering school in Nantes, which
I
is
see. I did not know you did mechanical engineering.
yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, so basically, I moved from east of France to fully west of France because Nantes is a town which is part of of the original Brittany, which is a very large town, and then I did my engineering degree there,
Mhm.
focusing on my specialty was control engineering, and
Mhm.
even though I got a BSc on naval mechanical hydrodynamics and
Mhm.
mechanical engineering, I focused more on control theory, then which is tied more to electrical engineering.
So let me interrupt you for a second. What got you interested in engineering? Is there something from your family, or you just
No,
teachers tell you? How did
yeah.
you, or by mistake,
Yeah, no, no, but it's by chance I went to mechanical engineering. But,
Okay.
yeah, I think I was the first in the family to have a higher degree, so I was not
Ah,
influenced by anyone for that.
okay.
But when I was a kid, I was completely fascinated by space discovery. So
Okay.
for me, it was Mercury, Gemini. All these people, Yuri Gagarin, all these people, until the in '69 on 20th of July, I watched with my parents live on TV landing on the moon. I wanted to do aerospace, but my sight
Very good.
was not fully working. So in fact, we in these 2 years where we are preparing engineering school, we are trained to address all
Right.
engineering school. So we do a lot of math, a lot of physics, and a lot of chemistry.
Mhm.
And then when you go through the concourse, your rank allows you to choose one school or another. And in fact, I decided to accept my ranking and to go to this school on mechanical engineering. That was the start of my my research in engineering. So I wanted to be an engineer, of course,
Mhm.
but I didn't know which part.
I
So
see.
when I went to this mechanical engineering,
Mhm.
then on the third year there was a specialization on control engineering, as I said. So for me it was a lot of math, you know, Fourier series,
Fourier series. Okay.
Pontryagin principle, you know,
Yes.
all this kind, Laplace and
Laplace transform.
transform and so
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, you know, it was good to having discussing. So I learned a lot about for time series prediction, a lot about measurement, control loops, and so on, which was fascinating because this was Venus, you know, how to control a rocket and
Right.
Venus. So then we had Kalman filtering, which was
Yeah.
very also very for me it was very fascinating. So Planté-Gragin, Wiener, as I said, Kalman. There were people that were talking to me, you know.
Mhm.
And then I decided to apply for a research grant to do a PhD in engineering school.
Right.
So I did a PhD, and I did a PhD. The topic was about singular perturbation.
Mhm.
That was a topic that was really well addressed in France in IRIA at that time, which
Yeah.
is a research center on computer science, but also in in Urbana, at Urbana, you know, the university where Peter Kokovic were working most on singular perturbation, which address how to handle slow and fast dynamics in a control in an engineering system. So I did my PhD in this topic, and I was very happy.
Mhm.
And by the end of
So,
my
yeah, so but let me ask you one question first. That I know you got excited because of you learned Kalman filtering, and you know all this, you know, Fourier transform, Laplace transform, and all the stuff Fourier series. But what was the step you thought that maybe PhD is the right thing for you to do, instead of just finding a job right after your college, you know, university education?
In fact, as I said, the third year for me was really, how do you say, something that I found very useful when I started control theory. And in fact, I was good in the training. So this pushed me to do more. Of course, when I finished my engineering degree, I tried to apply for some companies to get a position. For example, I applied for a company doing follow up of rockets. So, but I was not chosen. They said that the degree of my school was not high enough. You know,
I see.
they thought that maybe Polytechnique or École des Mines was better, but so I didn't find. And I suddenly there was this big program in France on research which was dedicated to complex system and automation.
Okay.
And this was completely new, and there was an opportunity. And I said, well, I should apply, you know. That was it. And in fact, not many people did apply to this grant, in particular in my lab. So I got this grant for 3 years. That was even better paid than other grants, research grants. So I was really happy because I was in a research group then that was mostly tied with other research group in France, in Supélec, in Paris, which was in Toulouse, where we have a huge laboratory on automatic control, and some others. So École des Mines in Paris. So that was motivating. I mean, this was a new and very new and very small group of people completely committed and who had ideas. So I liked it.
Yeah. Which years was that? When you
So I got my grant in 1975 September. I got also my first son at that time.
Okay.
So it was challenging to have to start research with a young baby. But that was it. And in fact. I did the 3 years of my PhD, and then I had to find a job. And first, locally, there was a company which was working for oil drilling
Mm-hmm.
in France, and they needed an engineer on a project for designing anti-heaving system for oil drilling because of the tide, all the materials that you have to put down on the ground of by the sea below the sea could be knocked down and completely crash. So you needed to damp a lot the effect of the tide. So you need this was completely fully control theory, control engineering.
I see.
So I designed a system there, and it was very successful. It was showcased for in reality in by the Africa coast, West Africa coast, but the purpose was merely to do it for seas where the tide is very high, like the North Sea and so on.
I see.
And then the I found that the job was fully repetitive. You know, you change the parameters, so you did the same simulation. At that time, we didn't have a lot of computers,
Right.
so I used what we called hybrid computer. You know, part of it was analog to represent the system, and the control was digital.
Okay.
So this is what I designed.
I see.
And when we had to go on the boat, we couldn't move all the stuff there.
Right.
So we did our first experiment with the first how do you say, not mini computer, right? It was more than a laptop, but it was Thomson 205, you know, the basic small computers that we create. It was called mini computer, but it was very small, you know. It was that size. So yeah, so it was showcased that way.
I see.
And so after 1 year, they proposed me to stay, and I said I would like to try elsewhere. So I applied at INRIA to get a postdoc or sabbatical leave.
Okay.
So I got one, and I moved to Manchester in England,
Okay.
and I was part of the control theory lab that was hosted by the University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. This
Okay.
university does not exist anymore, has been merged with the University of Manchester.
Right.
So I was invited by a professor.
Let me. I did not know that. This is very interesting. My father studied at UMIST.
Okay.
Yeah, in the
UMIST.
50s before he came to Paris.
Yeah.
You know, so this connection I did not know. So
Yeah,
this is
so-
very interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I used to work with people that were quite knowledgeable, and in fact, my job there was, of course, I changed the subject. I was more on parameter estimation, identification of processes,
Okay.
which means that you get a lot of data, you have, and you try to reconstruct the transfer, the system, the models that we
Right.
have. You know, we have state space, and you have the output conditions, and then this is where we used Kalman filtering intensively.
Okay,
I mean, I
okay.
used it intensively.
Yeah, so this
Yeah.
first time you realized that how to apply it, sort of.
In practice. So
Yeah.
it was, I was invited by late Professor Madan Singh, whom I knew from my PhD years, and it was a very fruitful year for me. I had MSc students from different parts of the world, Brazil, Iran. But that time it was just when Khomeini went to power,
That's
and we had the first Chinese student coming out of China, and they usually went to Great Britain. So that was gone. My wife stayed in France. She was supposed to come with me, but she was graduated to be a judge. So she had to go to her own school in Bordeaux, and at that time.
Okay.
And then when my contract, my year was finished, I came back to find some job, and I don't know, by chance, I received a message from Toulouse, from a professor in Toulouse working in complex system, and he told me, well, you know, CNET, which is a research center for telecommunication, is looking for a researcher in control theory to address new issues on network control. Because and I said, well, I should apply. I met them in a conference. I mean the head of the department, and he said, you're done. So when you come back from Manchester, yes, you'll go, and it will be in Issy-les-Moulineaux, next to Paris, because this is where one of the location of this research center was since the 40s. I mean, this is where, and then we tried to find a place where my wife could get a job, a post in court, and I try to find. So I settled in Paris and never
moved
left.
out.
Yeah.
And so in some sense, your move to telecommunications industry is accidental almost.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
It is, sometimes you cannot plan. We always say you have a plan and everything.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things. Somebody says, you could apply controls.
Yeah.
And network controls, right?
Yeah. Indeed, most of the people, at that time, most of the research was done on planning. Of course, there were systems, about
Right.
optics and switching. But I mean, as an engineer for controlling and managing, it was mostly offline
Right.
planning and so on. So a lot of operation research, not control theory,
Right.
but rather I would say the static part of the
Right.
operation research. And when I moved, then suddenly I discovered that I was knowledgeable in applied probability, but I never used Turing theory. So,
Okay.
so that was a bit strange to me, but finally I find my way, because it was the beginning of the digitization of networks. So
right.
first we had some people worked on digitization of the transmission network, but I was on the switching part. So which was at that time the first electronic switches. Part of them were partly mechanical, but the control was digital, and the beginning of the digital switches, which were fully digital. And at the time, it was decided that we needed a new control plane for networks that was called Common Channel Signaling number 7.
Right.
And this is why I started working on this part
for
for congestion control. Now I became a delegate to ITUT, because this was the primary venue for standardization to address congestion control and to do some recommendation. The other part of my job was how to control traffic flows in the network. Right. So traffic routing was completely static and deterministic. But since we had digital switches, we had thought, and I think before I joined CNET, and CNET is a research group before France Telecom, what became France Telecom and now Orange. So when I entered, some people had already ideas on adaptive routing. In particular, the people from Toulouse whom I know from my PhD thesis in the complex system group. So they asked me, would you like to take over the responsibility for CNET for developing a dynamic routing system?
And I said, for
telecommunication. I said, of course, this is my background. These are people I'm used to work with, and it's fascinating because everything was about to start. Of course, there had been some preliminary work. For example, I remember Narendra tried to use
at Yale University.
Yale University was doing linear reward penalty reinforcement. It was learning, but it was not called AI. We had even in CNET we had people working on a very small scale on how to balance the load dynamically according to traffic load. And of course in Canada, there was a group working on what they call dynamically controlled system, which was real-time DCR.
Dynamically controlled routing.
while in AT&T, you were part of it, they were mainly working on the, I would say, the long time the change of dynamic routing, using pre-planned changes due to non-coincidence of peak hours, which was very interesting.
Yeah, the peak hours, because United States has multiple time
Exactly,
zones.
exactly.
So,
And this is why I began connected with people from
so
Bell
this
Labs.
was probably early 80s, mid 80s.
It was. I started working with AT&T, for example, as a collaboration in '82. My first visit to AT&T was '82,
Very interesting.
and then I met people from Canada, and then people from NTT, KDD, who were also working on
I
dynamic.
remember that.
And
Because they had a very interesting paper in 1973, I think.
Yeah,
The first ideas, even before it was implemented.
Yeah, so we formed a group,
Yeah.
I would say precursor,
Yeah.
early adopters of dynamic routing.
Exactly.
Of course, internet did not exist for such a way, because it was not an open public network, so there was only the work done within DARPA
Right. That was
for
still-
ARPANET. For
Only
ARPANET.
universities were connected in the US in the early 80s.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I remember your name from when I worked at Bell Laboratories, from AT&T Bell Laboratories. I worked there from 87 to 89. And I came across your paper, which Janusz Filipia,
yeah, exactly. I
you know,
wanted
the
to mention
routing
it.
paper, right? I said,
Yeah.
oh, Prosper Chemouil, this must be a very, smart person. I need to meet him someday.
Yeah.
That was my thought, so, and we become friends over years.
Over the
Very
years we
interesting.
became friends. So yes, suddenly I was there working with those people, and we decided to make some holistic research.
Right.
And at that time, in 1984, 83, I met Janusz Filipiak, who was a researcher in Krakow University, a professor. Invited him as a sabbatical, and we worked intensively at CNET for years. I mean, even when he was there, we worked together, and we published some very, I don't know whether they are important, but some papers that laid ground for how to decide between dynamic or adaptive real-time routing algorithm. And I kept in touch with Janusz until these days, and we are still friends. I'm visiting him every year in Krakow. He has the largest computer development company in Poland, and he has I would say a worldwide scale company. So he succeeded. When he was appointed director of the Teletraffic Research Center in Adelaide in Australia, I went there to work with him for 6 weeks. So I stayed in Adelaide. I went many times in Krakow University to work with him. So I would say from 1985 to 84, we had a systematic collaborative research work together. And after he created his company in 1982, 83, so he focused rather on the development of his company, but we were still in touch.
So when did you join France Telecom R&D?
Okay, so CNET, in fact, was the telecom industry was under the umbrella of the government. It was the Ministry of Telecommunication.
Ministry of Post and Telecommunication.
So the center was a national center for telecommunication. So I joined this part. When this was a bit not dismantled as in the US understanding, they decided to create companies. That was completely a bit disjoined from the government. So it was called France Telecom. You had Deutsche Telekom, British Telecom.
Exactly.
So it was France Telecom. So that was the company, not one, but the company. And then it got privatized by 1983.
Okay.
93.
Yeah.
And honestly, all the people that were in CNET were moved to France
Okay,
Telecom
okay.
R&D. Some left, but
Okay.
very few. And
Mhm.
incidentally, we bought France Telecom bought Orange, the mobile company, when mobile was developed,
Mhm.
and then the company France Telecom was rebranded in 2006, if I'm correct, at Orange. So I moved from CNET to France Telecom R&D to
Mhm.
Orange Labs,
Mhm.
which was exactly the same for me.
Exactly.
I didn't change job.
Only
Of
the
course,
name change, no?
I changed responsibilities within Orange, but I didn't change the company.
Uh-huh.
So I
Uh-huh.
stayed there until I
Re-
retired in
Retired.
2018. So
2000.
along the years, I became head of the teletraffic department that
Yeah.
was dealing with traffic management and
Mhm.
network management,
Mhm.
and I became then responsible for the research on network protocols and traffic performance.
Mhm.
Then I became responsible for the program of what was called Network 2010, that was end of 90s,
Mhm.
then network and systems, and then network of the future. So
Future.
and
Yeah.
post IP network. So
Post
I, I enlarged. So at that
everything.
time, so when I was doing congestion control and dynamic routing, very quickly I saw that dynamic routing was not enough.
Enough. Okay.
And I discussed when I was in ITU, I discussed with many people and I say we need to connect network management with
Right.
dynamic routing, because
Right.
when there is exhaustion of resource, rerouting doesn't help. You
Help.
need to do admission control, trunk reservation. By that time it was mainly the plain old telephone system. So
Right.
there were not many
Mhm.
networks, so I was working
Mhm.
on the
So,
expert
so one
25.
question I have: did in the French telecommunication network, did they deploy dynamic routing eventually, or
Yeah, or
they did?
finally, in fact, I was
Right.
responsible of the huge project to develop the dynamic routing in France, and we had three use case,
Okay.
like for network management. In
Right.
fact, we have the long distance telephone network, Paris telephone network, I mean
Yeah.
the area, and the
Mm-hmm.
international network,
Ah.
which have different rules for interconnecting to other carriers.
Right.
I initiated in 1989 an international project with Jerry Ash
Right.
from AT&T Bell Labs,
Yeah.
with Peter Key and Dave Songers from BTE,
Right.
and
Telecom.
also Frank Kelly was part of
Right.
it, and also with Telstra.
Yeah.
It was OTC, because at that time Telstra and OTC were not merged, and KDD,
KDD.
and
Yes.
to try to
KDD
develop
in Japan.
in
Yeah.
Japan, yes,
Mhm.
to try to develop a methodology for using the non-coincidence around
Of time
on time
on the world scales.
across the whole
Globe.
world.
Yeah.
So that was very interesting.
Very interesting.
It didn't it We had very few, but we had mainly two major papers that were published, one in JSAC and one presented in an ITC conference, International Teletraffic Congress. But mostly we didn't end up for the
Mhm.
international to have a dynamic routing. For Paris network, we didn't have the economical gain, in fact. So the
Because
only
it's small. I mean, it's very stable
it
area.
was
So
stable, yeah.
yeah,
You had no way to
much
to
variation to
update
manipulate. Mhm.
and we proved it. And finally, for the long distance for the transit network, the higher part of the network, dynamic routing was introduced in by the end of 97, 98, but it didn't last long, because then the telephone networks
Yes.
become outdated, and we moved more and more
Right.
to ATM and
IP
IP
network.
networks. Yes, yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Prosper, if you look back at your career from where you started talking about to where until retire, is there two or three things you are very proud of that you did, that you can
Yeah.
identify? Which two or three things you say, I'm so glad I did that. I'm not talking about that in terms of that being a successful
Yeah,
itself.
yeah, yeah.
I'm talking about from your perspective of doing that. that you felt like I'm so glad I did that sort of?
Yeah, honestly, for the first part of my career, dynamic routing was really very important.
Very important.
And I mm, it worked. I worked on it for almost 15 years.
Right.
You know, so it was significant
significant.
time to do it. What is important in this time frame is that we were not many working on that topic, and we were very. I mean, very known research center working on that topic. Very
Right.
few selective, you know,
Right.
Bell Labs,
Right.
you know, that was BNR,
Bell
Northern
Research in
Research.
Canada, right.
Yes, we had British Telecom, you had France, you have NTT and KDD. So that was really, and we formed a group of people who used to meet, and mostly I would say we became friends.
Right.
For me, that's very important. That
Very important.
it was not only the technical success because we believed in it, but there was no. The competition was not economical competition.
Right, exactly. Right.
That was mostly.
It's the intellectual curiosity.
It was intellectual curiosity. I'm maybe this is not correct today, politically correct to tell that, but that was the truth.
Yeah.
And for example, you know that our friend Jerry Ash is retired in Florida. We have still contact with those people.
Right.
I'm in contact with Charlie Pack from Bell Labs and later from Bellcore. So I have contact with Japanese people.
Right.
I enjoy that.
Mhm.
And the second part was mostly dedicated to network management as a
Right.
whole, which embedded, in fact, dynamic routing,
Of
which
course.
was a part.
Mhm.
Because then, when I was in ITU, I became vice chair of network assessment in the study group dealing with network operation,
Mhm.
which means the practice so this was important because, you know, at that time we had earthquakes, we had war, we had failure, like you remember the Blue Monday in the States when the common channel signaling simply
Yes.
collapsed.
Yes.
When I was the day before the Iraqi war was started the first time in 1991. I was in the international network management with Maurice Flory from AT&T from AT&T. Was not in Bell Lab, he was in the network operation center, and then everything was planned for the next day as routing. You know.
Yes.
It was known that the war was imminent. So the war started on 16, if I'm correct, of January, and on 15 we were there. Routing was routed, that traffic would be rerouted, that traffic would be blocked because there would be a focused overload towards this region, not only Iraq, but Israel, because Israel
Right.
understood, and all
Mhm.
this kind of thing. Everything was prepared. So I can see that the telecom industry took care of that, and you know
Right.
that the first thing to be destroyed in a war is the communication. So I think the first objective of the American army at that time was to destroy the telecom tower in Baghdad. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so we did that, and so it was very interesting. So and then there was a rise of programmable network, you know, by
Right.
the end of the 90s.
Mhm.
That was great. We talked about autonomic networking. So I
Correct.
was in group with people
Right.
from Cisco and from different parts. We work on the concept of the,
Yeah.
and then it became, suddenly I was in Stanford for a while for visiting a fellow, and I met some people who were talking about how to program networks, you know, and suddenly this was there was Genie, you know, the program, the research program in that, and you say, well, I sensed it. If I'm proud, is that I sensed a lot of disruption. I wouldn't say that I was the father, but I sense it, and I say we should work for this. So in the group that I led in Orange, I said we should work on that. In fact, we should work on SDN. Some people were working on virtualization already, but programmable. The network was programmable. That was a different issue. And then we had a lab in San Francisco. I worked with my friend Christos Kolias, and we set up. We tried to work on SDN, and at the same time, we were talking about using not customized firmware for virtualization, and that was NFV, network function virtualization. So I was in the small groups that started working
lot
on
of
network
new stuff. Very interesting. So it's so the Prosper. What is I find fascinating. That's partly why I'm doing this sort of series of conversations. Is that we actually do not know when we start where we're going to end up. I mean, now we always think, okay, you have to be very, we need to know this is what we're going to do or everything. But the world is always changing. Even in a, technology especially, that you need to be able to adapt and stuff. So in that context, is there certain fundamental knowledge that you learned in either from school or university that helped you to, or way you looked at it, that helped you to adapt to those changing situations? Is there something that you can think about actually that comes to your mind?
Yeah, in fact, I would say that in fact the control theory for me has been the ground for that, because the aim on the control theory is to adapt to changes.
Exactly. Right.
So what we did when I sensed that there was something moving, I said, well, we should try. It doesn't mean that I applied control theory for the decision, but in control we are using Nash-Hall equilibrium, Stackelberg topic. So we are used to uncertainty, and this is why when we had the time series, I liked it because I applied Kalman filtering in time series. So for example, I was in ITU for traffic engineering, and suddenly there was a group working on traffic forecasting, and I said, oh, there are ARIMA model, we have Box Jenkins, you have Alt Winters, why don't we try a Kalman filtering? So at that time, I issued, I did a program with one of my colleagues that was distributed worldwide. It was on a floppy disk, which was how to use, that was implementing Kalman filtering for traffic forecasting. So traffic forecasting, not for the next time period, but for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. Of course, not too far, because prediction becomes completely wrong. So this is what, and when you go from network management control with automatic control, and you go to programmable network, this is part of automatic, and then autonomic, and then you have intelligent artificial. For me, the map. The concept created by IBM, measurement, analyze, plan, execute. This well-known group. That was exactly what we were using, in fact. Now you say, do we adapt? For example, by the end of 80s, there was a big hit about expert system. So we tried to build an expert system and then I said, expert system, yes, it's nice, but it's based on why don't we try qualitative reasoning? So starting, I tried to I published papers on how to use fuzzy control for dynamic routing, and it was presented at Globcom in 1980. 2 or 3, and then we had with my PhD student, we used neural network for anomaly detection for the telephone network. So it was a long time ago. So it was the early end of 80s, early 90s.
So this is very important and interesting. What I will say is that now, especially nowadays, we focus on learning all these tools and everything, but it's important to get a few good fundamental knowledge, because you can apply those fundamental knowledge throughout your career in a different variations of it. I think that's I think a very very
Yeah,
important
it's
part.
and it's important to know the limits. I
Yeah.
mean, when you have the background, you know the limits. I mean,
Exactly.
you cannot take it as granted. It's not
Exactly.
gospel
Yeah,
song, you
it's
know.
and it's not a black box.
It's not a
Black box. So
it's
that's very important to know that anything you learn is not black box. Nothing is going to
not fully black box.
but
You could
not-
have one,
yeah,
but it's
but
not.
it is you know you have to understand the limitation and
Yeah.
accordingly adapt and
Yeah,
adjust
and-
to that what now.
Yes, this is today we are talking about explainable
Yeah.
AI or human in the loop.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that is this makes sense, but. I think the background allowed me to handle this, and you know I have covered. I mean, all changes from the basic circuit switch telephony to the now fully virtualized network. You know, with orchestration
Yeah, exactly.
and
You have seen the whole everything.
Yeah, I'm a dinosaur.
No, you're not a dinosaur because you're being able to adapt.
Yeah.
So
No, yeah,
that's the beauty of it. No,
No,
So,
but and you know that I'm officially retired from Orange, but I'm still working at university as an adjunct.
yeah.
And I think this is also always discussing, meeting with people you have been acquainted for years.
Yeah.
That keeps you up, you know.
Right.
And you cannot stop thinking because you are on retirement. So you
Right.
have ideas.
Yeah.
You're coming. Why don't you say? And then you find new colleagues. You know, I'm now
Right.
working with another colleague
Right.
from Orange in Poland.
Mhm.
I published some paper with him. I'm very glad having published. I made paper with Aurel Lazar, who was one of the founder of programmable networking. I'm fine. I'm not. I like to
Right.
to diversify my research community,
Very good.
and this is why I'm involved in conferences. And,
Excellent. This is
yeah.
very good. So, Prosper, this has been fascinating hearing about a little bit about your. I won't say a little bit, quite a bit about your life in a very it's a short amount of time, but I was wanting to capture that, and so. Do you have any parting message for anything that you want to say before we stop the recording?
Yeah, maybe first thank you for giving me the opportunity to explain, because my father and my mother didn't understand what I was doing.
Right,
So I
right,
hope
right.
that people watching this video will understand a bit better. I think that don't. I think one of the messages that I hear is that don't let you guide by the trend or by others. Do your own path. So try
do
to
your-
identify.
very
try to-
important,
and
do
be,
your own path.
And for me, there are different things. Be perseverant,
Mhm.
be committed,
Mhm.
be trustful and reliable.
Mhm.
Because if you are not, then the community will not follow you up. Your ideas will not be accepted. You need to sustain what you are saying. You know, you cannot say, "Oh, I think it's a good idea to do this." You have to prove somehow, whatever, whether it is architecture, whether it's algorithm, whether it's an orchestration plan. You have to go to go beyond only simple facts. So if you believe on something, go. Just don't. It might fail, but
Yeah.
failure is not a problem. This is part of life.
Right.
I mean, and if you don't try, you will never succeed. So, yeah, in my career I was always ahead, not of time, but ahead of expectation by others. Because when I felt that it was interesting, I was pushing a lot for not only me doing it, but colleagues doing it.
Mhm.
You know?
Right.
And this is my message. I mean,
Thank you very much. Thank you for spending the
Thank-
time with me.
thank-
Here. Okay.
thank you, Did.
Okay.
Ciao.
Okay, ciao. Bye bye.